Hey everyone, welcome back. Today we're diving into something really interesting. Uh, it's straight out of the Hindu, by the way.
Yeah, it's a pretty big deal, actually. I mean, especially if you're prepping for the UPSC
Yeah. Oh,
exams.
absolutely.
Yeah.
This is like front page news kind of stuff,
Uh,
global power shifts, economic strategy, all that good stuff.
right, right. So basically, what we're looking at is China making this move to they're restricting their engineers and some specialized equipment too from going over to India.
Specifically to Foxconn facilities, right?
Yeah, exactly.
And that's, well, as everyone probably knows, Foxconn is, they're
Well,
huge,
huge, yeah.
like the
Right.
biggest contract manufacturer out there.
Basically. And, they're the ones assembling iPhones for Apple,
Right, among other things.
tons of other electronic.
But they've been ramping up their operations in India, and that's where this whole thing gets, well, that's where it gets interesting, I guess.
It does,
Yeah.
because you have to ask yourself, why would China want to slow that down? I mean, it's almost like they're trying to stifle India's growth in the tech sector.
Okay, so just to back up for a second, for anyone who maybe needs a refresher,
Yeah.
what's the big picture here? Like, why is China so concerned about India becoming a manufacturing powerhouse?
I think a good way to look at it is this. China's been the top dog in electronics manufacturing for decades.
Right.
They've got the experience, the infrastructure,
Workforce.
the workforce, everything. They've perfected those secret recipes for, all the latest gadgets, and now India's starting to cook up some competition.
And China's feeling the heat.
Exactly. They don't want to just give away their hard-earned expertise. They want to hold on to that control, that dominance in the global supply chain.
It's like they're guarding their secret sauce,
Yeah,
you know, making sure nobody else can replicate it.
precisely. And it's not just about iPhones or even electronics. It's about maintaining their economic and geopolitical leverage on a global scale.
It's like a chess game almost.
Yeah.
Every move is calculated.
Yeah, it's all strategic. And, this whole thing ties into another trend that we've been seeing, this China plus one strategy.
Oh, yeah, right. I've been hearing that term thrown around a lot lately.
Basically, it's companies like, well, Apple's a good example. They're realizing that they can't put all their eggs in one basket.
Especially with all the, trade tensions and pandemic disruptions we've seen recently.
Exactly. They need to diversify their manufacturing, have a backup plan, and that's where India comes in. They've got a large workforce. It's getting more skilled all the time. And,
And they're hungry for investment.
right. So, on paper, India looks like a pretty good option.
But then China steps in and pulls a move like
And
this.
it's a power move. It's like they're saying, hey, hold on. Don't get ahead of yourselves. We're still the ones calling the shots.
So how does India respond to that? I mean, they've been talking a big game about boosting their domestic manufacturing, right?
Yeah.
Making India a reality.
Yeah. And they're not just talking, they're actually putting their money where their mouth is, with things like the production linked incentive scheme, the PLI.
That's the big government initiative, right? To
Or the-
incentivize companies to manufacture in India.
Right. It's basically a system of financial incentives aimed at, attracting companies and boosting domestic production.
But I think it's important to break that down a bit more.
Yeah.
For our listeners who are prepping for the UPSC, what exactly does the PLI scheme entail? What sectors does it target?
So the PLI is primarily focused on key sectors like smartphones and, well, components for electronics in general.
Because that's where the big dependence on China is, right?
Yeah. We're talking about things like printed circuit boards, camera modules, all those crucial bits that go into making a smartphone.
And India currently imports a lot of that stuff from China.
Right. So the idea behind the PLI is to encourage companies to set up shop in India and start manufacturing those components domestically.
And it seems to be working, at least to some extent. I mean, they've even increased the PLI allocation for 2025, right?
They have. It's a sign that the government is really serious about this, about making India a global manufacturing hub.
But even with all these efforts, there's still this elephant in the room, so to speak.
Hmm.
The fact that India still relies so heavily on China for those essential components.
Right. And that's the real challenge, isn't it? It's like trying to win a marathon with a weight tied to your ankle.
So it's a bit of a catch-22. India wants to become self-reliant, but they're still dependent on the very country that's trying to hold them back.
Yeah, that's the dilemma. And that's what makes this whole situation so fascinating and, so important for our listeners to understand.
Because this isn't just about business. It's about geopolitics. It's about power dynamics on a global scale.
Absolutely. And it's a story that's still unfolding. The decisions made today will have a huge impact on India's future as a global player and, frankly, on the future of the global economy as a whole.
It's tricky, right? Like, how do you break free from that dependence when you're still reliant on those key components?
Oh, right. And that's where strategic partnerships come in. I mean, you need to look at the bigger picture. It's not just about going it alone. It's about leveraging the strength of others, working with companies, well, companies like Apple and Foxconn, for example.
They already invested in India to some degree.
Mhm.
Foxconn has those big factories, and Apple's actually assembling iPhones there now, right? The iPhone 15, I think.
Yeah, they are. And that's huge. It's a sign that, these global tech giants see potential in India. And the government's been really pushing for that too,
Yeah,
attracting foreign direct investment or FDI.
right, FDI.
Right.
And I think it's working to some extent. I mean, especially in places like Tamil Nadu and Karnataka,
Mm,
they're becoming real manufacturing hubs.
they are. And, for our listeners who are, well, for those of you prepping for the UPSC, this is important stuff. I mean, understanding how government policies, FDI, and regional development all tie together.
Because it all feeds into the bigger picture of economic growth.
Right, exactly. It's all connected. But, going back to what you said earlier about relying on companies like Apple, I mean, doesn't that just shift our dependence from one country to another?
That's what I was thinking. Like, we're still reliant on their technology, their supply chains. It's just a different flag flying over the factory, in a way.
That's a valid point, and it highlights the long-term challenge for India. It's not enough to just assemble products. You need to build a robust domestic supply chain.
Okay, so what would that look like? I mean, paint me a picture of a truly self-reliant India in terms of electronics manufacturing.
Well, imagine if India could manufacture its own semiconductors.
Whoa. Okay, now we're talking.
Right, because semiconductors are the brains of modern electronics. If India could produce those domestically, it would be a game changer. I mean, think about it. Reduced reliance on China, a whole new ecosystem of high-skill jobs, technological expertise. It's a big goal.
It is, but how do we get there? What are the steps India needs to take to make that happen?
Collaboration is key. Working with companies like, well, the Apples and Foxconns of the world to transfer knowledge and technology.
Okay, so partnerships are important.
Hmm.
But we can't just rely on handouts, right?
Absolutely not. India needs to invest heavily in R&D, research and development, nurturing its own talent pool, fostering innovation.
So it's like a two-pronged approach, leveraging existing partnerships while simultaneously building up those indigenous capabilities.
Exactly. And this brings us back to economic statecraft. India needs to use its diplomatic muscle to negotiate favorable trade terms, attract investment, secure access to critical technologies.
It's a high-stakes game.
It is, but it's a game India needs to play and play well to achieve those manufacturing ambitions.
Right, because ultimately, it's about more than just making smartphones or laptops. It's about securing a place in the global tech landscape
Oh,
and shaping the future of the Indian economy.
precisely. And for our listeners out there, those of you burning the midnight oil prepping for the UPSC, this is essential stuff.
Because it's not just about memorizing facts. It's about understanding the forces that are shaping the world.
Right. Analyzing situations, identifying challenges and opportunities, thinking critically about potential solutions. That's what's going to set you apart in the exam and in your future careers.
And speaking of resources, all this insightful analysis, well, it all stems from this great article in The Hindu. I highly recommend checking it out for a deeper dive into this whole issue. So, I mean, we've talked about a lot here. China's strategy, India's ambitions, global partnerships. It all comes back to that question, though, right? Can India actually pull this off? Can they really become self-reliant when it comes to, making electronics?
That's I guess you could say, the million-dollar question. And it's one that, I mean, I bet a lot of our listeners are, they're probably thinking about it, especially if they're prepping for those UPSC exams.
So what do you think? Is India on the right path? I mean, they're making moves, but
Yeah.
are they enough?
It's hard to say for sure. I think they're moving in the right direction, but it's a long road. And it's complicated. I mean, you've got these internal challenges, like getting that semiconductor production up and running. And then you've got the external stuff, the geopolitics, the global relationships. It's a lot to juggle.
And technology, I mean, it doesn't stand still, right? What's cutting edge today is, old news tomorrow.
Exactly. So India has to be, they have to be flexible. They have to be able to adapt. And they have to be looking ahead, always thinking about what's next.
It's been a really interesting conversation. I think our listeners, especially those who are, getting ready for those UPSC exams, this has been, it's been really valuable. Any final thoughts for them before we wrap up?
I'd say stay curious, stay engaged, and keep connecting the dots. I mean, this is all connected. The
Yeah.
geopolitics, the tech, the economics, it all ties together. And understanding those connections, that's key to crafting good policies, to actually making a difference.
Couldn't agree more. And of course, all of this comes from that great article in the Hindu. Definitely worth a read for anyone who wants to dig a little deeper.
Absolutely. Go check it out.
Okay, so before we sign off, we want to hear from you. What do you think? What are the strategic steps India needs to prioritize to, really achieve that self-reliance in electronics manufacturing?
Yeah, head down to the comments. Let us know. We love hearing your thoughts, your ideas, and who knows, maybe we'll feature some of your insights in a future episode.
And while you're down there, don't forget to like and subscribe to the deep dive. Get more of these deep dives into the current events that matter, especially for those of you working towards those UPSC goals.
Yeah, hit that subscribe button.
Okay, until next time, keep those brains buzzing and good luck with those exams.
Keep learning.